Hello, my name is Joe, and welcome to my channel. Today, first of all, before I say anything else, I'm trying a little bit different lighting here. We'll see how it looks. I wasn't really happy with the way the last video looked, so I'm slowly experimenting and hopefully improving. I don't know. If it doesn't look good, just deal with it, I guess. But today, I'm very excited. I have read my first Western. Of course, I'm participating in June on the Range 2024. I've never read a Western before. I've mentioned that I've had a Louis L'Amour novel. It's actually Troubleshooter, starring the character Hopalong Cassidy. I've had that sitting on my shelf for maybe 15 years now. Never read it. It's the last book in the Hopalong Cassidy, I guess, series. So I bought it on a whim. When I started reading it way back when, I realized, you're supposed to know this character, and I kind of chucked it back on the shelf and haven't touched it since. So I'm very glad, though, that I chose to read this book, which is Hondo by Louis L'Amour, as my first June on the Range book, my first Western, and my first Louis L'Amour novel. I really like this. This was great. I'm so glad that this was my first Western. And as most of you probably know, this book is written in 1953, but it's actually an adaptation of the movie Hondo, which also came out in 1953, starring John Wayne. And this was based on a Louis L'Amour short story. So it's similar to the case of 2001: A Space Odyssey, the film by Stanley Kubrick, and then the book by Arthur C. Clarke. The book actually came out second, and that's the case with this. The book came out both in 53, but this came out second, and they're both based on a short story. Which I did not read before this. As you can see, this is still in the cellophane. Haven't watched it yet. At some point this week, I found it cheap online, so I figured, reading the book, I'll see the movie. I will check this out at some point soon, and I'll probably make my first movie review on this movie. So that brings me to the book and kind of my thoughts on the book. The first thing I want to point out is, one, I love this picture on the cover. And actually, I kind of prefer the Louis L'Amour novels, the ones with the white spines, and the picture is kind of fills the whole cover. I guess these where they have the solid background cover in just multiple different colors, but always a solid background with the name and the title down here, and the picture is going to kind of almost makes it look like a picture frame. I guess it's trying to make these seem less pulpy and give them a little more, I don't know, respect for the author. But I gotta tell you, I wish I had found the version of this where this just took up the whole cover and it looks more pulpy. I just think those are better, and they all look nice on the shelf, maybe with the white spine. But anyway, this is the one I found, so there it is. So the first thing I want to point out is comparing it to the movie that I have not seen yet. As soon as I started reading this, I gotta be honest, I didn't really see John Wayne as Hondo. So again, interesting that this movie came out before the book, but that's the first thing I noticed. This character kind of, that's Hondo to me, and that doesn't really look like John Wayne. I guess if I had to pick an actor, it would maybe be more of a Charles Bronson type. Not really Charles Bronson. I can't think of an actual actor that I would pick for Hondo. But for the most part, not really John Wayne. If you haven't read this, so I'll give a brief summary and brief overview without any major spoilers. Basically, Hondo, the character, he's a half white man, half Apache. He kind of walks in both circles. The Apache respect him, the cavalry respects him, and at the time of when the book starts, he is working as a scout for the cavalry. And then the backstory is that the Apache have the tribes are kind of gathering under one chief, is kind of banding the Apache tribes together to fight the cavalry. So that's what's going on in the story. And that's actually mostly, yes, there are some cavalry action scenes, but that's mostly background. The book starts out immediately with an action scene, which I've read books that start out that way, and I don't really like it. This one, I think, does it well. The action's very well done, and immediately you feel the desert, and you feel the heat, and kind of the desert plants. And there's an action scene that starts out. Hondo is fighting, I think, 2 or 3 Apache warriors, and there's a thing that happens multiple times in the book. The Apache have the ability to just, when there's danger, when one guy gets hit, the rest of them immediately drop to the ground and then just disappear into the desert. And that happens a few times in the book. Hondo, like I said, he's half Apache. He has lived with the Apache. He can do it himself. So he also just kind of disappears. And then it becomes this waiting game of, all right, did I get them all? Did they leave? Where are they? And it's really cool. So that's how the book starts. It happens a few more times in the novel. And any of those scenes where there's violence and then quiet and you feel the desert work really, really well. And Lamore does that, I think, very well. And he does it multiple times in this book. Speaking of the action, kind of before I move on with kind of what goes on in the story, I thought the action overall was very well done. There was a few moments where I felt like I kind of lost track what was going on. There was one fight, if I remember correctly, where all of a sudden we're punching people. I thought we were separated. And I'm only mentioning this because I recently watched Steve Donahue's takedown of Cormac McCarthy's The Road. I've never read The Road, but I have seen the movie. I didn't really like the movie that much. So my opinion of Cormac McCarthy, even though I want to read The Road at some point, my opinion of him has probably been tainted by Steve Donahue. And 2, it made me conscious of that critique in action scenes where the author may skip ahead in time and it's like, wait a minute, that character wasn't 20 feet. That character was 20 feet away a second ago. How are they now fighting? You didn't write about how he moved up. So there was a couple moments where I felt that happened, but overall, that's very minor complaints. That's nitpicking. Overall, the action was very well good, and the pacing in general was great. So the book starts out with Hondo. He's scouting for the cavalry, and he pretty early on comes across a ranch that is it's just a wife and her son, and the husband, you're not really sure if he's just a deadbeat and he's run off. Hondo clearly immediately does not think highly of the man that's, should be here on his ranch. So you're not sure whether he's dead or he's run off, and immediately Hondo and the woman, whose name is Angie, immediately there's a connection. He likes her, she likes him. Hondo, who's kind of a very, maybe not just an outwardly nice person, maybe he's a little rough around the edges, he's obviously a loner. He immediately takes a liking to the young 6-year-old son, Johnny, as well. And this is where we kind of get to the core of the novel. It's a romance. I mentioned there's the Apache are kind of banding together, they're fighting the cavalry. That's all kind of background. Yes, there's cavalry action scenes, but the big cavalry action scenes actually happen. We don't read about them. They have them off screen. So the core of the story is the romance, and you're left wondering, kind of, will this brief romance that's clearly happening? And again, the husband, is he alive? Is he run off? We don't know. Is he going to show up at some point? You're wondering if this romance is going to last, and you're rooting for them. You kind of want Hondo. He starts thinking, I like this kid. Maybe could settle down. You root for it. So that's the core of the story. There's also something happens in the book that will cause some tension between Angie and Hondo, and yeah, it's nothing complex. It's nothing too mind-blowing, but it's very well done. And I liked how that was the center of the story, and the action, while it's there and it's very good, the main action scenes, we don't actually see them. There's also a great character, the Apache chief, I think it's pronounced, it's Vitoro, I think. He's kind of an interesting character too, and he at some point will show up at Angie's ranch. And his interactions with Angie and her son are very interesting. And he's a really interesting character. But overall, it was a very enjoyable read. I'm glad I read it. I'm excited to read, I'm excited to watch the movie and talk about that. But overall, I loved the setting and how you could feel the desert. And that's what I think, and I've mentioned this in several videos now, that's what I'm looking for in a book. I'm looking for the place to feel real. I'll mention a negative answer of a book that I did not that I realized. I think many years ago I realized that I liked this about books. It was the author's name is escaping me, but he wrote The Wizard's First Rule, and I did not like that book. I know many people do. I did not, and it was because immediately off the bat I thought this world feels shallow. I don't immediately feel that there's a bigger world. You don't get that with Lord of the Rings. You don't get that with Wheel of Time. You don't get that. I haven't really read much of it, but the Malazan Book of the Fallen I've read. I didn't finish it, but that book, immediately you feel, oh, there's a bigger world here. Didn't get that with Wizard's First Rule. Anyway, that was a fantasy tangent, but the point is that you get it with this book. You immediately feel the world. It's not, this big grand fantasy, epic, but it's the place. It's the desert, and it feels very real. Anyway, I think that's all for now. The next book I'll talk about, I think I'm going to do a Star Trek book next. I'll start that this evening. Might be a Next Generation novel. And then at some point, I want to read my Zane Grey novel that I have picked out. But anyway, that was Hondo. If you've never read it, find it, download it on Kindle, and read it. If you like Westerns, you will enjoy this. But that's all for now. Thank you.